Hey there, Georgie here with Ukraine Matters. Yesterday we talked about Zelensky assigning Kirilo Budanov as the head of the office of the president, essentially making him the number 2 man in power in the whole country, which is a big FU to Putin. However, as it turns out, it was just the first stone of the big avalanche of reforms that is hitting Ukrainian governance and the big changes that are coming both for civil sector and the military. So let's talk about this as well as some other events happening in the world right now in their relation to Ukraine. With Budanov now confirming that he will be taking over the role, this is now a big change in Ukrainian command structure. But more importantly is that this was just a part of the moves. In his later statements, Zelensky outlined some other major changes that are hitting the government. Firstly, the change of the Ukrainian Minister of Defense. Instead of the current defense minister Denis Shmyhal, the new minister will be Mikhailo Fedorov. And for a lot of you, Mikhailo Fedorov probably doesn't really say a lot of things unless you have been following the situation in Ukraine and Ukrainian technological capabilities. Because if you had, then you know that it was the guy that basically brought the whole plethora of technological innovation towards Ukraine. Something like Brave One platform was grown and being promoted and working with Ukraine so much was thanks to Mikhailo Fedorov. Mikhailo Fedorov additionally was the person that spearheaded cooperation between mutual investment into technologies, Ukraine and non-Ukraine. He has been the person that has been actually pushing to get more Ukrainian technology into the hands of the ally and get more production of technologies for Ukraine in the allied states. More than that, Mikhailo Fedorov is the person that also spearheaded the whole Ukrainian line of drones project headed by Magyar. He also was the person that really introduced this gamification effect system where priority of targets needed to be destroyed was assigned by providing the FPV pilots and drone pilots in Ukraine these electronic points, which they then used to buy new equipment for their units, essentially making this self-optimizing gamified system of efficiency within Ukrainian military. So the fact that Matter survives right now and is able to stand up to Russia and cause immense damage to Russia is because of Ukrainian developments within drone technology. And in that area, one of the leading names is Mikhailo Fedorov. So the fact of the matter that he is now going to be becoming a defense minister of Ukraine means one thing and one thing only. There's going to be a huge push towards more efficiency, more technology, and more drones coming Ukrainian way. I think this is fantastic news because Ukraine definitely has that technological edge over Russia. It was always the question how they can scale it up. And Mikhailo Fedorov, in some of his speeches, was outlined that he would like to get more support for the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Well, now he is the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. It's definitely great change. And besides changing the Fedorov, there has been also other appointments, a little bit different level. For example, Kislitsa is going to be first deputy to Budanov. Kislitsa used to be the UN ambassador of Ukraine, and he had a very sharp tongue. I recommend you Googling Sergei Kislitsa and in UN responding to Russia, something along those lines, and you will find some really sharp-witted responses towards a Russian state. But more importantly, in his later interview, President Zelensky stated the words that myself and a lot of other people were really hoping to hear: the reforms inside of Ukrainian military. President Zelensky essentially outlined that what he is doing right now is trying to rotate and reboot, so to say, the efficiency for Ukrainian governance, so to say, based on the current landscape and the current needs of Ukrainian states, focusing explicitly on defense needs and making sure that it's the people that understand the threat and the needs of Ukrainian defense are coming to the places of power. And while at this moment he has not been telling anything about the reforms in Ukrainian military, he did state that military is coming right after this. So while for now Syrskyi remains the commander-in-chief, it is very clear that Zelensky stated that it will be looked after that what kind of changes are needed in the Ukrainian military. So as soon as essentially this rotation of political and government leaders is going to be concluded, we might see them talking with the military. It has been already announced that both Budanov and Fedorov will be talking with different representatives on different levels of Ukrainian military, and they will start preparing the reform plan needed for Ukrainian military to perform. This is, I think, takes us a lot of the way forward because the issues have been piling up and we all hoped at some point they will start getting resolved. Now President Zelensky came out to the cameras and said that he's putting the best people that have quite significant clout and respect in society and in the military in charge to prepare the reform that is so badly needed. This is truly Zelensky putting a dream team in action to reform the Ukrainian military towards the coming future for Ukraine. And talking about future, Zelensky outlined overall two paths that he is working on right now. He states that Ukraine right now is on diverging paths. There is path number one that they are pursuing as primary. That path is diplomatic one. In that, they will try to work with the allies to agree on a potential diplomatic path with the security guarantees on the table, with the proposals for having both the European and potentially even American troops present on the Ukrainian soil with significant support and capabilities in case Russia attacks again. And more than that, the ability to then have peaceful transition of power and referenda about what Ukrainians see the future like. However, all of it is dependent on the diplomatic efforts on the allies. Zelensky came out and stated that right now the ball is in the allies' court, more specifically Donald Trump's court, because right now Donald Trump and it seems a lot of European allies as well believe that there is some kind of window of opportunity for some kind of negotiations with Russia, where Russia could agree of Ukraine just ending the war and Ukraine finally receiving its necessary security guarantees and a clear pathway to joining the European Union. Yet we all know here on this channel that Putin is most definitely not going to agree. Therefore, President Zelensky also outlined that in a case that this is not going to happen, Ukraine is working on the second path. And second path is long-term planning, expecting a longer-term war. Because despite what the propagandists are telling you about Ukraine being absolutely broken, that Ukraine is already about to collapse, we all know that it is not true. Otherwise, Russia would already advance somewhere. Yet the reality is that in the last year, where Ukraine had a lot of unresolved issues, Russia was able to advance barely 1% of Ukrainian territory, and they're still trying to capture the city of Pokrovsk and Mirnograd. So when we look at the results on the front line, Russia is nowhere near winning their achieving their goals on the battlefield. Instead, Ukraine is trying to grow their capabilities. Having someone like Mikhailo Fedorov that understands the value of drones, that understands the value of asymmetrical warfare, having someone like Budanov knowing how special operations can turn the tide of war in charge and preparing document for the necessary reform in the Ukrainian military, that is the thing that can truly really change the way that Ukrainian military is going to perform. So it is very clear, especially in his latest statements, that President Zelensky is seeing the all picture exactly for what it is, that Russia, even if it is not ready for war, Ukraine is preparing for the future in which Russia will continue its advances and Ukraine will have only one way forward: to crush them. And for that, the necessary steps are being made. Then talking about situation in Venezuela, I will not be covering it on this channel because I am focusing on Ukraine, and that is my only purpose and goal. Hence the name of the channel, if you haven't noticed. But the situation in Venezuela also is a positive signal towards the outcome for Ukrainian war. Because right now it seems that more positive scenario is playing out, where the conflict in Venezuela could end pretty fast, with Donald Trump taking the political victory and the whole situation being resolved. And in that case, we might see a very positive scenario where sanctions are lifted from the state of Venezuela, the oil from that country starts flowing onto the market, providing a proper opportunity for India and China to diversify from the Russian sources and essentially pushing Russia even closer towards accepting potentially some kind of a off-ramp, so to say, to end the war and maybe accepting the deal that is being prepared by Ukrainians. Yet, overall, despite me being kind of in favor of the situation because it does bring us to a more positive scenario towards the war in Ukraine, this is what we are exactly seeing. This is a president of United States conducting regime change in another states, and everyone is seeing it for what it is, basically the oil rush that we already seen before, unfortunately, in our generations. So while everyone right now, we might celebrate and enjoy that the leader and dictator of Venezuela has now been dethroned, we also might be aware that this can really come back to haunt us in some 10 years. So please remember that. We know how this happened before. And finally, the situation in Iran, where the new protest wave is taking over the country. This is great news, and potentially we might see regime change with the leaders of Iran being deposed, and we might see Iran returning to something that is a little bit more favorable towards democratic states. Iran is a major disruptor of peace inside of the region, and with it gone, we might see some kind of a consolidation of the whole region, and we might actually see Iran becoming a little bit more normal state. And once again, in that case, we will see additional oil being flown into the markets, providing additional support for Ukraine, in a sense that Russia getting less of the profits from their oil. And from our side, the best way to support Ukraine is continue participating in our fundraiser for the FPV drones. We're going very strong, and I appreciate every single one that is able to join up. It's a long-term goal, so don't feel too pressured if you cannot right now after the whole Christmas and New Year holidays. In any case, thank you so much for watching. As you can see, I will be making a lot shorter these videos, hopefully focusing on less amount of news compared to the previous year, but I'm planning on releasing more videos, generally speaking, to cover events up to date instead of having these big bloated blocks. Thank you so much. I love you. Slava Ukraini, trust in Ukrainian armed forces, and I will see you next time.